Welcome to Decades of Horror, the 1980s. This is episode 162, recorded August 5th, 2020. I am your host, Jeff Mohr, and this podcast is about horror films released between 1980 and 1989. Each episode, my co-hosts Bill Mulligan, Crystal Cleveland, and Chad Hunt, and I will tackle another classic or not-so-classic film from this radical, gory, influential, and gruesome decade. Joining me tonight is Bill Mulligan, writer, director, and special effects guru and co-host of Decades of Horror in the 1970s. Bill, how are you doing?
Doing okay. Summer's almost over.
Yes, it is. Some people think the world is back to normal and some don't. So here we go.
That's a laughable lie, but okay.
Unfortunately, Chad Hunt and Crystal Cleveland could not be with us tonight, but we've decided to soldier on without them because we're kind of excited about this episode. And even though I said every episode we're going to cover a movie from the 80s, I lied.
We do that sometimes.
We are not covering a specific film, and for the most part, we're not covering the 1980s. But we do have a special treat for our listeners. In episode 159, we covered The Dead Pit, and the film's director of special effects, Ed Martinez, joined us for that episode. And it just kind of made sense to us that we would bring Ed back to interview him on his career and effects, and he was so kind as to agree. So before we get started, I'm just going to list off a few of Ed's credits that at least I was able to find and watch. And some of them have they have some interesting things to them. So just to let everybody know, in IMDb, he's listed as Ed Martinez, and there's a bunch of them. So look for the one that says special effects by the name. Besides Dead Pit, his credits include Amityville: A New Generation in 1993, which has Terry O'Quinn and Richard Roundtree, David Naughton, and some other recognizable faces in it. Another movie is Terminal Force, also known as Galaxis, in 1995, that starred Bridget Nielsen and Richard Mall. We should all remember as Bull on Night Court. And Sam Raimi is in that as well. Death Row from 2007, that stars Joe Estevez and Todd Bridges. People can remember, I can't think of the name of that now, but the one with Willis and...
Different Strokes.
Different Strokes, that's it. And actually, his brother is in it as well. Then also a video that's online from the Limousines called Internet Killed the Video Star that has some cool effects in it. A movie called The Dead and the Damned, also known as Cowboys and Zombies, from 2011. That's exactly kind of about what is Gold Rush times, and a meteor or something that with radiation is creating zombies. And then a short called Project Arbiter that's really kind of cool. It's a science fiction short set in World War II. And lastly, The Story of Eva, which stars Eric Roberts as one of the key players, which is kind of interesting too. So after all of that, let's let Ed talk a little bit about it. So Mr. Martinez, how are you today?
Very good. Thanks for having me back.
Glad to have you.
You're staying safe?
Yes, I am. And ironically, this thing with the masks and everything from the Myshoronivirus virus, we had in the Dead Pit, we had the mask on the evil doctor throughout the whole film.
Yes. Yes.
Yep.
Well, we had to have we were hiding something behind that mask, throughout the whole film. And then at the end, at the climactic sequence, he whips it off and reveals that he's dead and rotting, his whole lower jaw is practically falling off,
Yes. So, just to get things going, I've got a long list of questions here, but after we recorded the Dead Pit episode, you said you thought of a couple of things that you would like to talk about. So I'll just let you get into those now.
Sure. One of them was about the fact that I kind of thought about, even though I'm blind now, my wife is looking at a lot of the photos from the dead pit that we were sending you, and she was going, wow, look at all these mask photos. It's like we should make memes. We could make memes from some of these photos. But
yes,
anyway,
you could.
anyways, some of the other anecdotes that I remembered were, for instance, some how effects in a film often get planned and get built, and a lot of time and effort gets put into them, and then they don't get used for something, or they get cut. They get shot, but they get cut. For instance, we talked a little bit about there were some trims from the original full-length feature film to the video release, the VHS video release. And technically, there were some cuts, minutes here, minutes there, trims, off of the effects sequences, like where he's doing in close-up, inserting needles into a brain or something. Well, there was a few other things that were not included in the final film, too, that were planned and built and executed as far as my end of it were concerned. And one of those were in the sequence, where the tower, the water tower gets blown up. The inmate man, the Stephen Gregory Foster, he is supposed to be an explosives expert from the war, the military trained him. And so he gets a bunch of materials and he builds some improvised explosive devices. And, he climbs up that tower and he's placing them strategically on the struts of the tower so that when they blow, the tower will get one leg loosened and the weight, will shift and the whole tower will come tumbling down after the holy lady, nun has blessed the tower and turned it into the holy one. So the funny thing is, I built this articulated dummy, an exact duplicate of the guy who was playing the zombie, who comes up the tower after the hero. And, the hero's up there trying to get the fuse lit, and he's striking the lighter with his thumb. And ironically, the extreme close-up of the hand lighting the lighter is my hand. But, this is my cameo in the film. I did some hand acting. Where
you don't have hand model as one of your
right. It does. It's just, later on in my life, I started taking hand model credits, But it was my first time, and we did not have the actor available to us on an insert stage, when we needed to do some of these pickups. But I volunteered. And at the time, I used to wear a lot of wrist, like rubber bracelet things on my arm. And I had to cut them all off in order to do the shot. So my hand would match the guy. But funny, I lit the fuse. And then the dummy that I built we went to a lot of trouble. It was, it had fully made ball and socket joints, made out of wood.
I was going to ask how you did that.
Yeah, so that the arms and legs, when it was thrown off, would not bend backwards. So it would look like a real human body as opposed to... I always hated how when you see a movie in a film, where they throw a guy off a cliff or something, the flopping arms, they look so fake and bend the wrong direction. The legs, knees, everything all bends the wrong direction. So I spent extra time with some of my crew guys building this dummy. And actually, we even found in Cinemagic Magazine a how to do it step-by-step article about Tom Savini, I believe, built a dummy, an articulated dummy of himself that he would use in films where he would throw it off cliffs or whatever, Oh,
wow.
I need to find that article. I love Cinemagic.
I bet I still have it because I have a complete collection of Cinemagic Magazine in a binder, with all of them. And I bet I could find it, with my wife's help, and we could probably make a copy for you.
Oh, I'd love that. Thank you.
The thing is that we went to all this trouble. We built this dummy. We made it look exactly like my friend. His name was Damon Foster, who played all of our stunts. He took all the bullet hits. He did the stuff like he was going to climb up the tower and be the zombie who he gets like punched and kicked and things in various scenes. And he, gets completely different zombie makeup from various scenes so that he plays about 4 or 5 zombies and you don't even know it, but it's him again and again. But anyway, what ended up happening is on the night that we were going to shoot this, a bunch of people, like the method by which we would film would be everybody would arrive on location, like all these zombie extras, 30, 40, 50 people would be arriving. They'd be finding parking. They'd be getting, their clothes, their costume. We had 2 baby pools, those plastic baby pools you can buy, at I know Toys R Us has gone out of business.
Yep.
Right. In the day, Toys R Us sold these plastic hard plastic baby pools. Well, we bought 2 of those. One of them was for methyl cellulose and one of them was for blood. And what we would do is each time a zombie got into their dry hospital gown outfit, and we didn't discover this until we began doing the makeup on everybody and dousing them with methyl cellulose, because their underwear, we told you about the underwear thing, their underwear would show through the costume, and it looked really bad. And so when they were soaking wet, they looked so much better, with all the blood drenched on them and all the wet methyl cellulose drenched on them and the zombie makeup done on them. So, we asked all of our extras, if they wouldn't mind, removing their, men were wearing boxers and tighty whities and women had bras and everything. And so they took them all off and they put them in their same place where they were keeping their wallet and their clothes and their shoes and everything. And they looked much better that way because, hospital patients, they get all that stuff taken away from them too, especially if they're going to be having surgery, they cut their clothes right off of them. But anyway, so we would stand them in a pool, baby pool, and somebody would come over and just douse them with like a bucket of this methyl cellulose. I don't know if you know what methyl cellulose is, but it's...
Oh, I sure do.
It's nice. Yeah. We were making gallons, hundreds of gallons. We had a factory running, back in my shop, where we were just making gallons and gallons of slime because what the methodology is that we found out that like if you put, a bunch of dead bodies, like in forensics and things like that, they would store bodies in formaldehyde or, some sort of preservative. And so what the evil scientist was doing was he was throwing them in the dead pit and then pouring like a 55-gallon drum of formaldehyde in on top of them to preserve their dead bodies in case he wanted to pull a body part out and do some more experimenting or whatever, So they were soaking wet looking, and it created a really cool zombie, made them look slimy and wet, and the methyl cellulose is literally slime. It's not water. It's thicker than that. It's like glue. It's like KY jelly,
It is. Yeah. I think it's one of the ingredients in KY.
Yes, exactly. And
great
so
stuff.
we had to play with methyl cellulose, and we made gallons and hundreds of gallons of blood, the Caro syrup blood formula. So we would pour blood all over their heads because they all supposedly had some sort of head injury or trauma or surgery or something. And we would cover them with methyl cellulose. And so they were freezing out in the cold with no underwear and these thin hospital gowns. And this dummy that we built didn't get used because unfortunately, the makeup, hadn't been done on a bunch of the zombies yet, and they were in their costumes, but they were out on the grounds around the base of this water tower, and we were going to do this guerrilla filmmaking style. We were going to shoot this in the middle of the night when nobody on the grounds of this mental hospital that was allowing us to rent the grounds. They were giving it to us for a really cheap price too. Like I believe the whole film, like we were there for like a month or something, was maybe $200 was all we paid.
Holy cow.
Oh man.
And it was carte blanche. It's like once we were there, once we had moved in, we got keys, we were just able to do whatever we wanted, because all these buildings were condemned and were going to be destroyed, torn down eventually. So I had my whole workshop set up in one downstairs building, and the dummy where, I'm in the building doing all the makeup with my assistants and everything. And outside, the people who are going to be zombies are out milling around waiting. And some of them stupidly started climbing the tower for fun and, just to see what they could see from the top and stuff. And there were security guards on site that would pretty much like go to sleep or not be there, near where we were filming once it became like midnight or 2:00 in the morning or whatever. And that's when we were going to shoot that. We were just going to get the camera set up, have, the dummy. Nobody was going to be up there. The part where they show the bomb and everything, there was a duplicate of what the tower looked like up at the top, but it was only like 2-3 feet off the ground, and it had the railing around it and everything. So all that footage of Damon, my buddy, the zombie, fighting with our hero and then getting punched and like thrown over the rail, that was only done a few feet off the ground, and he threw him over the rail and he landed like on a couple of mattresses. So that was all good. And what we were going to do then was insert the shot of somebody up there on the tower throwing the dummy off. And we'd follow it down, with the telephoto lens. And then we'd be able to cut all that together. And then we'd have the splattered dead body at the bottom, that you could show. So that would look awesome, to show boom, 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 fighting at the top, then boom at the bottom, and we didn't get to do the dummy thing. So unfortunately, but I still got to keep the dummy.
Did you ever get to use it in any other project? I mean, you built this thing.
Yeah, I still have it to this day. I have used it on multiple projects, including Retard Dead.
There you go.
And so, anyways, that was just one thing, though.
Uh-huh.
There was a mechanical head that we worked on. Remember how we made the suck down head?
Yes.
Well, that whole sequence I storyboarded in post-production after the film initially wrapped. We got more money and we were asked to come up with more effects for the final ending sequence for the meltdown and everything. And so I storyboarded the entire sequence, and there were inserts of an arm and hand with the ring on it melting down, where it was in stages, like where it starts off with a normal hand with the ring on it, then it turns to like a suck down hand, then it turns to like skeletal hand of bones, then it melts into a puddle. And the same thing with the chest. I made a torso and chest that had the evil Dr. Ramsey's mad scientist surgeon's smock on it, and it caught fire and burned, and the shirt burned away, and you could reveal the rib cage and the guts and everything beneath. And that's in the test footage that you might have seen that I gave you the link to on YouTube. If you go back and look at that test footage, there's a chest that's on fire that's part of the test sequence. And so all that kind of stuff was not in the final film, as well as this mechanical head. I made this head and shoulders that had blinking eyes that turned white. It moved its head right, left, up, down, back and forth. The jaw opened and closed, and it had tubes all throughout it that it would make it pus and bleed and smoke. But we didn't finish it. We got all the way down to the point where we were going to start gluing the skin on it, and we ran out of time. So we had to switch over to the suck down head and just finish that up real quick and bring that with us on set, which, in hindsight, it's okay. It would have been nice, to add these other couple effects, the chest, the head, the pus and the melting and the smoke and everything, doing things that you couldn't possibly do with a human being. Like we're going to have his jaw fall off and things, like the Fly. So anyway, that's that about the Dead Pit stuff that I didn't get to say before. There were others. What else is on Dead Pit's list?
Ghost stories.
Oh yes, there were some real ghosts on the premises. Like, in other words, because of that story I told you about where there was a mass grave on the location, the place, as well as since the 50s and hundreds of mental patients back in the day, they used to lobotomize for real, people just to keep them quiet, put them in a room so that they wouldn't flip out and make trouble for the people who were running the place and stuff like that. Like they used to treat people who were in these places very badly. And so the place had like a vibe. It had like, I think literally you could, I don't believe without physical evidence, in ghosts and stuff but I've had a couple of incidents, this place, other people told us things too. There were cold spots. There were voices. There were still wings of this place way far away from where we were shooting that did have people on the premises that were patients. But where we were was literally like it was acres of this place, So we were way far away, where we were all the condemned buildings where there was nobody supposed to be around there. And you could hear like faint crying sometimes. You could hear voices. There were cold spots, and you could, where I was in my building at the bottom, I had a 2-story building, but above me, I heard people walking around up above me in the building, and there was nobody supposed to be there. And people would come to see me, like I had a walkie-talkie, and I would be listening to them filming over on the other part of the building at night, and somebody would be sent to come to get blood from me or something, and they would show up, and I'd say, "Hey, were you upstairs or something?" They'd go, "No, I just got here. I just came in." And I'd be like, "Oh," because I heard upstairs, And one of the people that worked with me, who was one of the main zombie girls, she was my buddy. She became like an assistant in the makeup lab. And sometimes, she and I would take a smoke break and we'd go upstairs to the upstairs where we were hearing those voices and those footsteps and stuff. And she and I would take like a flashlight and the walkie-talkie and we'd go walking around and see what we could find out what's up here? Is there a homeless guy or anything? Rats, what is it? And we found some weird rooms. Like there was a room up there that looked like a punishment room where there was a chair bolted to the floor in the corner with straps, restraining straps, so that like if they had a bad patient, they would put him in this room, they'd strap him down, and he would have to face the corner. Like you're being a bad boy, you have to sit in the corner.
So basically, even though you make horror movies, you've learned absolutely nothing from them, and you thought it was a good idea to go explore the creepy sounds in the horror. Yeah. Okay, there you go.
I mean, not watching horror movies didn't teach me enough about like, don't go in there. You're always saying in the movie theater, like, don't go in there. It's like, I'm that guy, but at least I had someone with me. So I have a witness.
Yeah, so you won't die alone. That's good.
Right.
Yeah.
But he can tell the stories too, that we weren't lying, that there really were cold spots there. And this particular room that had that bad boy chair in it, boy, the corner where the facing of the person's vision would have been, all the paint was all peeling in that corner and nowhere else in that room. It was like hate vision had been burning up the wall,
Yeah.
One more last thing I'll say about Dead Pit is we never talked about the sound track, the music track on Dead Pit. And one of the cool things is after they went to the Milan Film Festival in Milan, Italy, they got the distribution deal for Europe, and they got this extra money. And here in our area, here in the San Francisco Bay Area, near where the film was shot, is a town called San Jose, California. And there's a college there, San Jose State University. And a man who was a teacher there, he was a professor of music, is named Dan Wyman. And he was the him and John Carpenter together assisted John Carpenter on all of his music, on stuff like The Fog, Halloween, Assault on Precinct 13, all that stuff.
Oh, wow.
So that guy is the one who did the Dead Pit's music. So you kind of notice a kind of a cool tone to the music, sort of close your eyes and picture John Carpenter films, and you think, aha, now I hear the brethren there, So that was a nice piece of trivia, that was added on to Dead Pit in all. Oh, and one last thing. Do you know Joe Bob Briggs, of course?
Right.
Absolutely.
Joe Bob Briggs was writing a column, back in the day, and he liked the Dead Pit so much that he used to do a TV, an awards program, for his whatever, for his show, for his column, for all that stuff. Every year he had the Hubcaps Awards, the Hubbies, he would call them, and that year the Dead Pit came out, he awarded the Dead Pit 2 Hubby Awards, one for the best screamer for Cheryl Lawson, and 2 for the special effects for the best. I forget how he called it, like the best zombie brain munching gore fest or something, like that. In the review he did for it, he was like, 4 breath zombie food, all his,
You're right.
He does.
That's good.
So he was on a television program with Connie Chung, the TV host, and he was being interviewed about his program and his books and his work and everything. And he showed the Hubby Awards nominees that year, including the Dead Pit. And I have that now, a videotape, an old VHS videotape that got recorded.
Oh, cool.
Of that segment. Joe Bob Briggs was praising, the Dead Pit on national television in prime time.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
I think it would fit right in with the revival that they've had of Joe Bob Briggs to show that one. It's such a great time capsule of the 80s.
Yeah, like Shudder. He's on Shudder now with
right. I might have to shoot him a request.
Yeah.
Well, just so you know, too, I ordered the Blu-ray for the Dead Pit. There's one showing on Amazon being released August 25th, and it says I forget the name of the company, but it doesn't say that, but if you track it down, it is Code Red. If you go to the website, it includes Code Red, and
I'm
it's
betting
like Dark Entertainment or something like that. I forget.
I'm betting that what's going to happen is that they're just going to release the same 2-disc set that they had on the DVD.
I think so.
Into a Blu-ray, which is a shame because I was wanting to communicate with them. I tried reaching out, and didn't get no response, couldn't get in touch with them, because I would love to have been able to provide, an audio commentary track and give them more new material. I held back on the original DVD release of all this material that I still have. And, if they would have been willing to communicate with me, I mean, when I provided to them all the material that I provided to them on the first DVD release, they didn't even send me a free DVD in the mail or nothing. I had to buy it.
That's not
Like
cool.
everybody else. And I provided them with stuff, that I took from my own collection and everything. And I had to pay to get it transferred, into digital format. And then, my own postage and everything to mail to them. They didn't give me nothing, so I, feel like, wow, you guys, I hope, it's a good release,
I tried to order it direct, and their websites were real funky. I kept getting stuff saying, the mailroom is reopening, making it sound like it had been closed for a while. I didn't know if it was because of the virus or what it was, but I could not find this to order it direct from them. So I just went ahead and ordered it from Amazon. So
I think that's a bunch of bull. I think what's really going on is it was two brothers, and I believe they've split apart, and it's just one brother now doing it all by himself. I heard an interview with him on some other podcast where he was talking about, like, he had a storage locker full of discs, and it was very difficult for one guy to be doing this, like shipping and, releasing DVDs and acquiring new DVDs and all that kind of stuff. And, it just was a shame that this particular company acquired the the rights for Dead Pit, because if one of these other companies, hopefully with more people involved, would have, maybe they would have contacted me. Maybe I could have participated on providing more, behind the scenes and things like that,
Right.
But, oh, well, I just was hoping that before the DVD came out, I'd be able to participate in providing more material.
right.
And, not DVD, before the Blu-ray came out, but who
Right,
knows,
right.
maybe a 4K Blu-ray will still come out in the future, and then I can help out.
That
before,
would, that would be
Too late.
cool. And I don't remember what it does say.
Whether it's 4K or not, or 2K. Or,
No, and I thought it's at number disc 1. So I hope it's not like,
then it probably doesn't have all that special material, because
I thought when I ordered it that I was getting everything, but
I believe
that would
when
be irritating.
well, I think you can still get the 2-disc one, because since your first drop of the first podcast, other people who were involved with Dead Pit have contacted me now through
Oh, that's
Facebook.
cool.
Yeah, and one of them was somebody who said, "Hey, I just bought it on Amazon. I mean, on
The DVD is still there. Yeah.
right. So if you could get the 2-disc set of the DVD, still, I would suggest you do that, because that's a smaller supply of those, and it was only like $19. He said, so
Right.
that's
Right.
I paid for it when I got it at Best Buy, originally. So anyway. Yeah, I mean, I don't know what difference it would be, unless you can look at the features on the Blu-ray, and if there's something extra that wasn't on the DVD 2-disc set, or if it's a single disc, then definitely get the 2-disc DVD version, in my opinion, because it does have a full commentary from not only the director and the producer, but I believe the actors too. I believe Cheryl Lawson and Jeremy Slate did their own track of commentary.
Cool.
Yeah, and there are little interviews as well as full commentary on the whole movie, but there's also little capsule interviews with Jeremy Slate, with him on film, with him on video at that time. So, before he passed away, he was able to sit in front of a video camera with those people from Code Red and record an interview, as well as Cheryl Lawson and Brett Leonard and Jamil. I didn't do any of that sort of thing. It seemed like they didn't care about the effects guy so much until I reached out to them and I provided them all that video behind the scenes footage, which I sent you guys the link to, because that's right off the DVD. That's the clip of all the material I sent.
Okay.
That surprises me, because, and okay, I realize that this may just be me, but I really don't think so. I think that's one of the things that people are the most interested in, how the effects were done, and that's. To me, that's one of the more interesting behind the scenes things. In some horror movies, that's about the only behind the scenes you get is some.
I agree.
special
I mean,
effects stuff.
personally, for my own collecting of DVDs in my life, I've always sought the ones that had commentary tracks and behind the scenes documentaries and stuff like that. Like, you guys know about that. Like, isn't there like a 4 hour or 6 hour or something ginormous documentary that some guy has just made recently that covers the entire 1980s, like your podcast.
Yeah. And that's on Shudder too. In Search of Darkness, is it maybe?
Something like that. Yeah. I heard him on another podcast one time. But what I wanted to know is, could you guys tell me, is Dead Pit on that long DVD documentary or whatever?
Oh,
I haven't got there yet. They're rolling it through by year, kind of.
Because he didn't contact me. It's like I would love to have participated on that documentary.
I'd be shocked if it weren't on.
Me too, because it's 1989. It's the end of that segment, that sequence of films that go all the way through the 80s. Also, the interesting thing is, I know he's now going to be doing a science fiction one.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
for the 80s?
Okay.
I think for the entire long, same length of decade, maybe even more. I'm not sure. He had another Kickstarter or something for that one.
Okay.
And I understand it's been fully funded now, if I'm not mistaken. And as far as the Dead Pit also is concerned, one of the sad things that happened was a young man who was a special effects artist, who was a helper of mine in the workshop. He was sick, he was ill. He had a heart problem, and he went to Stanford Medical Center, there in California, and got a heart transplant. And very shortly thereafter, after Dead Pit wrapped, he passed away because he rejected his heart.
Oh, wow.
But, yeah, he was really thrilled to be working on a special effects crew on a horror film. He really wanted to do that, in life. And so the fact that he got to do that before he passed, I was very happy to help him, get to fulfill that dream. But, rest in peace, Kurt Wells. He was a nice guy.
Right. That's sad to hear, but it is good you got that chance.
Yes. And he did good work too. He was a great guy. And then of course also Jeremy Slate, the actor, has passed as well. And rest in peace, Jeremy Slate. And also our cinematographer, brilliant cameraman Marty Collins, did Steadicam work, and for years he worked on many movies and was a fantastic filmmaker. And he is also passed. Rest in peace, Marty. So one other person that didn't get to be in the credits for the final film, unfortunately, is a man named Tim Azaria, who he's also a cameraman and a cinematographer, and he helped out with some behind-the-scenes videography. But he helped me a lot in my workshop on the reshoot, pre-production and production, working on the mechanical head that didn't get used, unfortunately.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, unfortunately, we hear a lot about that, about all the hours and days that go into, a lot of work on movies, but the special effects in particular. And then sometimes you might end up with nothing on screen, or you might end up with just a few seconds. So, Ed, I know we've talked about this a little bit offline, and I think maybe we touched on it in the Dead Pit episode, but what sparked your interest and passion for special effects?
Oh gosh, I mean, I'm one of those guys that all the contemporaries of my generation of special effects artists like Rick Baker and Steve Johnson, Tom Savini, like all these guys, we grew up on Famous Monsters of Filmland magazine and comic books. And when you're a kid, and the classic, what they call a monster kid, the classic thing of the Ben Cooper Halloween costumes, the having a comic book under the covers with a flashlight when you're supposed to go to bed, sneaking downstairs to watch a horror film late at night, that the whole family's asleep and you're crouched in front of the TV, watching a Godzilla movie or something. And so for me, like the earliest memories of black and white classic sci-fi horror fantasy films like King Kong, the original black and white King Kong, stop motion, that's what did it for me. And then from there, Mighty Joe Young and Son of Kong and learning about stop motion and Ray Harryhausen. being a dinosaur kid, being a lover of dinosaurs, making clay dinosaurs and shoebox dioramas in fourth grade, and graduating into making haunted houses in sixth grade. And, then, continuing on with the haunted house thing, that was a continuing passion all through my life. I'm a huge Halloween fan, and, we'd always start working on my Halloween costume in July, for October. And my birthday's in October, so I always kind of celebrated my birthday on Halloween. My birthday's October 2nd, and it's a boring day, but Halloween's coming, and so when Halloween comes, I was like, that's really my birthday, So, that's how I got my passion. That's how I got my start. I started making amateur films in the backyard with friends with 8mm, Super 8mm cameras. We used to build cardboard buildings like the Empire State Building and stuff, and fly, miniature airplanes like Japanese Godzilla movies on a monofilament from one end of the yard to the other and crash into the building. And then it explodes with fireworks and pyrotechnics, little packets of gasoline and stuff. I mean, I needed to have like 3 sets of garden hoses ready to go in case, we burned down the yard or something.
Yeah.
But, so, even before I could film that kind of stuff in high speed photography, I was training myself to do that, blowing up the tower in Dead Pit.
Well, that sounds like a common thread, because I guess, Bill, you did that too, right?
Pretty much word for word. Clay dinosaurs, stop motion, firecrackers, burning down the yard, hoping my parents wouldn't take my camera away.
Right.
Super 8 was such a fun medium. I mean, I wouldn't go back to it unless you held a gun to my head, but it was such a fun thing to work with. And there was a magazine called Super 8 Filmmaker. I mean,
I have tons of those too.
Yeah, a ton of this sitting rotting away somewhere. I'm sure the advice they give is still good, but just a fun medium because you really were a filmmaker. You shot film, you sent it away, you got developed, you looked at it for the first time and realized you forgot to take the lens cap off and all the other things. And then you had to physically, I mean, we say you cut a film. You actually cut your film. You cut pieces of it and glued them back together or put tape over them. It was the most primitive thing possible. And virtually every time you watched it with your friends going through the projector, it was scraping away the emulsion. And every time you watched it, you were degrading your own film. So it was like a perfect metaphor for art and life and everything. I loved working in that medium. But like I said, I wouldn't go back to it now on a dare. It was it's such an unfriendly, the lighting you needed to make it work. I mean, when I look at Super 8 films, those people lucky enough to have saved theirs and can find them and have posted them on YouTube, it's like, oof, getting it to be focused.
To 16mm, after. And, what a beautiful difference, because we could then get Bolex cameras that you could do, wound up Bolexes and do stop motion with a Bolex. And man, it made a big difference, But then, I just from that, graduated from that into my career was, like I started making Halloween masks for the local spirit store here in my town, of Hayward, California. Started, I got a job there. They hired me. I started doing, window displays and, selling makeup and doing makeup demonstrations, behind the counter and stuff. And one thing led to another. Freddy Krueger came out, became super popular. We couldn't get enough Freddy Krueger masks to meet the demand. And so the boss said, like, hey, you know how to make masks, go make some masks. And so I started making masks and selling them there. And one thing led to another and got a couple of jobs. I was in college. I kind of started getting some job offers on music videos, local musicians and bands and stuff. And, one thing led to another. And before you knew it, I was working on music videos and commercials and finally got my first offer, to work on a feature film, which was The Dead Pit. And that was my beginning.
Wow. Well, and I think you had said you had also worked in architectural miniatures.
Right. I did at the same time I was going to college and in between all these different things, I got a job at an architectural model building firm in San Francisco and worked on a bunch of different miniatures of real buildings that got built in downtown San Francisco, hotels and department, a whole mall, department store mall and things like that. And then those models, a lot of those models got borrowed for a television commercial that was shot here in the Bay Area, like a local news channel, Channel 4, KRON, Channel 4 News, shot a commercial where it starts with a miniature model of the Sacramento Capitol in here in Sacramento in California, and it travels through a helicopter shot all across California to the San Francisco Bay Area, and there's a model of the port of the San Francisco port and the bridge and these downtown, all these buildings that we built at this architectural model building place. And that commercial won a Clio Award. It was done with motion control and helicopter miniatures and things like that. It was a guy by the name of Paul Boyington, who his company shot that, and then they also did Nightmare on Elm Street 2 in Berkeley, right next to Phil Tippett's. Like Phil Tippett had on Gilman Street in Berkeley, he had two buildings right next to each other. One was this Paul Boyington shop who did miniatures and special effects and stuff, and right next to it was Phil Tippett, who was there doing RoboCop and Jurassic Park and stuff. So I was right in the middle of all this stuff.
Great stuff.
So your big break really was the Dead Pit?
Yes, that was my first 35 millimeter feature film.
Well, I have a question for you on Amityville, the new generation. So,
oh, sure.
I actually kind of enjoyed that. I was a little irritated at, I think it was, the IMDb ratings aren't very high.
Yeah, usually I think that was the 6th or 7th Amityville film sequel.
Right. But I enjoyed it, and we mentioned that there were some recognizable faces in that: Richard Roundtree, Terry O'Quinn, David Naughton.
Yeah, Julie Nixon Soul. She was David Soul, from Starsky and Hutch's ex-wife. She was the
right,
the woman painter. She's the one that wears the
that gets
she gets hung.
Possessed.
Yeah, she gets
hung. Yes. So the question I have is, I love the scene where he's sort of dreaming and inhabiting his father when he goes in and kills the whole family, or was it his? Yeah. Supposedly the original Amityville family. So the shotgun to the father's head, that was awesome. Was that yours, or was that?
Yes, I did. Well, what we did was, we molded that man, that actor's head, and and I did the molding. Me and my buddy Jeremy Aiello, who's like an amazing special effects makeup artist and sculptor himself. He and I worked on that, and we molded that guy's head, and we did what's called a hot clay pour. We poured hot clay, melted clay, in a double boiler setup. One big pot of water on a burner, and then another pot inside that with clay, which turned into liquid, melted, and then we poured that into the alginate mold, the full head mold of this guy, and created a solid clay head, head and shoulders of this man, and then removed the mold, and then we cleaned it all up, because he had a mustache and stuff, and we had to like shave away, like we didn't cut his mustache off when we molded him, but we had to recreate put a fake mustache on this fake rubber head. And then we had to fill it full of fake guts and everything. And they really blew it away with a real shotgun, the film.
How do you keep from blowing a hole through the room? And I only ask this because I've wanted to do this.
I actually didn't do that part. I let people like Tom Savini have been doing that for years. They say, I don't know what kind of shotgun pellets they use. They use bird shot, or rock salt, or how exactly they do it, because we make these fake heads with just a thin layer of these.
Yeah, it wouldn't take much.
Or latex, and then we fill them full of dog food and canned whatever craft services is thrown away.
That was gonna be my next question. What did you fill it with? Because I always heard like in scanners they threw in like shrimp and just all kinds of stuff. And
we're literally whatever they had. You go to craft services and you say like, okay, you got any leftovers, hot dogs, whatever, top ramen, you just throw it all in there. throw in some fake blood, a couple of condoms full of blood and stuff to make it so when it blows, it looks like chunks, like brain matter and bone matter and stuff. And it usually goes by so fast that as long as there's something liquidy in there with blood and stuff, it looks fine,
I find whenever I see that a bottle of latex is about to pretty much go bad and isn't usable anymore, I'll just pour it out and throw some cotton in there and swirl it around, make some chunks, and I have a little bag of chunks. just in case.
Always good. Always good to have chunks of flesh hanging around in the shop.
Yep.
There's a shot of him in profile laying on the floor, I think, the body, or maybe back in the chair, but profile where it's just the whole front of the face is gone, and you feel like you're seeing the jagged remains of a face. I thought it was really good.
Yeah.
Bathed in blood.
We always like to hear that. But we work with all those big name people. Like David Naughton was a great, he was a very nice man. He was very pleasant to work with, and we got to do this cool burn on his face, and with gelatin and stuff. And then I've told you, I'm blind now, and so my eyes are actually turning white, like a blind eye effect, but for years, I've owned white contact lenses as well as other colors too. And for that scene in Amityville, David Naughton wore my white contact lenses, because they can be worn by different people. The ones that are, not full sclerals and not hard lenses. These are soft lenses. So with proper care and lots of saline and everything, he was able to put them in, for just a quick scene, where he comes up like in Dead Pit. There's one of those hospitals that we got to shoot at in LA this time, a defunct hospital. And it had the same kind of doors in those rooms where there's like a little window, with that wire mesh in the glass. And so David Naughton's in and these are kind of like, you feel like these are like cells that they keep these people in these rooms. And so with his burn makeup and those white contact lenses, he slams himself up against the door and puts his face up against that little window and goes like,
Yeah.
So that was fun to work with him. And then later at a Fangoria Weekend of Horrors, when Dead Pit came out on DVD, I was invited to come to the convention, and me and my buddy are wandering around the convention, and there's David Naughton sitting behind a table signing autographs, and he remembered me, and he's like, Ed, hey, how's it going? And so I walked over and hung out and talked to him, He was great.
Yeah, he's always seemed like a really nice guy at conventions.
Yes. He knows.
And stop me anytime there's something you want to talk about in that film. But I do have a question about Galaxis, a.k.a. Terminal Force.
Sure.
In IMDb, it says you were stop-motion puppet.
Yes, I wanted to ask about that too.
Yeah, myself and a buddy of mine, Lionel Ivan Orozco, built the robot puppet. Like, in other words, what I had to do was, this was very short notice. At the time, I was involved with video game work, at Atari here in the Bay Area. They were doing some, various stop motion involved in video games. And they were having the man named Sneaky Pete Kleinow. He went by the name Sneaky Pete. Unfortunately, he's another gentleman who is no longer with us. He's passed away, but he was brilliant. He did all the stop motion animation for the Terminator, the first Terminator, and also all the stop motion in the second film, the second Terminator film too. So anytime you saw the stop motion of the endoskeleton, his animation, he didn't build the puppet, but he animated it. But, the puppet's on the cover of Cinefex, the famous Cinefex issue of All About Terminator. But so I got to work with him, Sneaky Pete Kleinow. He also worked on Gumby and Pillsbury Doughboy and just tons and tons of stop motion throughout his whole career. And so he was hired on Galaxis to do the stop motion of the robot, and myself and my buddy, we built the robot puppet, and he animated it for the film. I did very little on that film, but
the robot looked good. It looked like they didn't do a very good job mating it, but whatever they have to do to put it into the real
matting it in. You mean? Yeah,
right. There you go.
The guys that built the full size version, there was an actual on set robot full size from the waist up. And that was KNB. KNB did that. And so I got to hang out on set. They brought their full-size robot puppet, it was cable controlled and had like a little cart so that it didn't have legs. So any shots, where there was a filming of the robot next to a real person, they could put their robot in the shot next to a real person, because Bridget Nielsen and Sam Raimi and all these different people are in the film, and the film has like a high-tech sci-fi sort of like spacecraft cockpit interior sort of look. And it's funny because the man, Bill Mesa, I can't remember if it was his son or his grandson or what, but there was a child who comes in, and it's kind of like, how in Terminator, how, the Terminator endoskeletons are underneath human tissue of a real person, sort of, they have bad breath, they sweat. Well, in this film, the robot we made is sort of a Terminator style robot, and he comes in as a child. He morphs from
right.
feet tall into full 6 foot tall robot or whatever, and then once he becomes a robot, then he starts terminating everybody. He's like with like a machine gun arm, and
yes
that was the reason for the puppet, the stop motion puppet. But it was neat to be on set all night long, and meet Brigitte Nielsen and meet Sam Raimi and meet, all the different actors. Richard Mall, he was the villain. He used to be Bull on Night Court, big bald guy.
Yeah, and that's a fun movie too. I think they weren't going for the Terminator; they were going for over the top.
Yeah,
even the way they acted.
The best parts were the sci-fi-ish, spaceships and in the sci-fi spacecraft kind of looking locations, and the part where the robot comes and stuff. Because once that portion of the film, which I believe is all at the beginning of the film, like the first half hour or so, once you get to Earth, it becomes just kind of like running around in back alleys and in bars and brawls and gun shooting and car chasing and that sort of thing, because it's so expensive, to shoot all the stuff on sound stages with sci-fi sets and everything. So, I flew to LA and I stayed on location, and they shot all night long. And they didn't have to, because it was an interior set location, but I think it was just, that's how low budget it was, that they had to keep filming all night long. And so here's, these guys from KNB and me, like crashed in the back of the set on mattresses and stuff, because I flew in around dusk on like a Friday, and I stayed all night Friday night until the next day, and I flew back out to San Francisco about 2-3 o'clock in the afternoon the next day. So I never stayed in a hotel room or nothing. I just hung out on set and crashed on those mattresses in the back with all the other guys. Bob Kurtzman from KNB, K and Kurtzman is KNB, and those guys were great, to hang out with, and they told me stories of other movies they worked on, and this robot they made was pretty cool, but we had to duplicate it in miniature and create a stop motion puppet. Same look. So I got to go and be on set to videotape and take pictures so that I could see that full-size prop and be able to match it with all the reference material that I was able to gather by going to visit the set that one day, When it comes to Lionel Ivan Orozco, I wish that he could have gotten screen credit.
So he wasn't listed on the credits for the end of the movie.
Right, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's too bad.
Do you think stop motion has much of a future now? Is there a nostalgia for it, or is it just the kids today, having not grown up with it, really don't appreciate it the way those of us like ourselves that watched King Kong and all their Harryhausen stuff? And it was kind of jerky, and there was definitely a lack of reality to it, but I thought that was part of its awesomeness.
So as far as stop motion is concerned, I love stop motion. Stop motion is practically my first love. I mean, before, I got into Star Trek, I got into Star Wars, Planet of the Apes, all that stuff. And of course, makeup is just as big a love as stop motion, but my first love was stop motion, and everything from Gumby to the Rankin Bass Christmas specials and the Snowman, like all that stuff. And for me, that's how I got my start, just messing around with 8mm and clay and all that stuff. But to this day, now that I'm blind, of course, things are different, but we have a spare room here, and we've turned it into our little studio, my wife and myself. And she has created her character. She has a little character she's created, kind of like Gumby or Mr. Bill or whatever. And we've been doing our own little stop motion tabletop stuff, as well as just live action puppet stuff and still photos, like using like PowerPoint for like a slideshow kind of presentation of, still photos to make a little story and stuff. And so, ever since I was a kid, I figured even if I never got into the Hollywood effects work. I would build stop motion puppets and make little claymation movies and stuff in my spare time, in my garage or in my spare bedroom or whatever. Anyway, just because I like it, because I love it, and because, and I don't really care if the world out there embraces it or whatever, but I do think they do. I mean, look at all these Latka and Will Vinton and these production companies doing feature-length stop motion, ever since Nightmare Before Christmas and James and the Giant Peach and all these films, that keep on getting made. Paranorman and Kubo and the
sheep, the I can't remember the English guy who does the one with the
I know what
dog.
you mean.
Yeah, Wallace and Gromit.
Yes. Oh, I love those.
There's just something about stop motion, the fact that it's real, that there's an element of reality to it. It's not just drawn.
Yeah, the tactile.
Yeah, I take nothing away from cartoon animation, which is
I
beautiful.
love that too.
I love that too. But there is just something unique. But then I wanted I'm going to be the next Ray Harryhausen. Then I started playing around with it, and I realized, oh no, I'm not. That man. That comes along once in a lifetime, maybe.
I kind of had that happen to me 3 times. Like once I thought I'm going to be a comic book artist for Marvel. And then I figured out wow, it takes so much effort, so much time to draw. And then somebody else has to ink it and somebody else has to put the words and somebody else has to put the colors. You only get paid $15 per page. So it really matters how fast you can be and everything. And then I said okay, maybe not, and I also thought oh, maybe I'll be an animator for Disney. And then I found out how many drawings repetitively you have to draw the same character over and over and over. And I thought, maybe I won't do that. And then I thought, maybe I'll do stop motion. And then I thought, oh my God, I love it, but I will try to keep doing stop motion, even though it's very time consuming. But we have so many advantages today to what we used to. Like when I was doing 16 or stop motion with the old days, you had to send the film away, like you were talking about, and you didn't know if it came out right until it came back from the lab, and very time consuming, very expensive. But now we have video. We have on my iPhone, there's free stop motion apps. You can use your iPhone. You can remove frames. You can use onion skinning. You can anything that didn't come out right, you can take it away and redo it. It's just amazing the advantages with the tools that are available today. But, at the same time, I also feel like it's still a discipline. It still takes a long time. You still have to work hard. You still have to do it's not easy no matter what.
Yeah. Right. In fact, you made a little tribute to Ray Harryhausen's 100th birthday. You and Nina.
My wife and I, yes. And we made it accommodatable for the blind. In other words, I love stop motion. And usually, when you watch a Ray Harryhausen movie or whatever, other than the monster noise, you don't know what's going on unless you're very familiar with it like me. I've got the entire Harryhausen collection, and I've seen them so many times. I can tell just by the music and the monster noise what's going on. But now that I'm blind, I'm learning about this whole thing about when you put a photo up on Facebook now, there's something called alt text for the blind, where if you put a description of the photo, then when somebody like me is using Facebook, you will not only hear all the words of what is being said in the captions or the post or whatever, but you'll also get a description of what the photograph is. Right now, it's very basic. If you haven't bothered to fill it in, it just says something like sometimes 2 people standing outdoors or something like that, just basic. But if you take the time to fill it in, you can make it say full description of standing on a beach, 2 men from the film Ray Harryhausen, whatever, whatever you want to call, describe that photo. So I suggest, for anybody who wants to help people who can't see and who are trying to use these apps and stuff like me, please use alt text. But so my wife narrated the little thing that we did. If Ray Harryhausen were still alive today, he would be 100 years old. And so on his birthday in June, we celebrated for a whole month prior, we were preparing, we were working diligently hard, on our little stop motion tabletop set to do this tribute to Ray Harryhausen. And we put Tentacle grabbing a cupcake, and we put sparkly letters, and we put all I own a bunch of stop motion puppets and a bunch of resin garage kits and all these different characters of Harryhausen. I have a Medusa, I have a Calibos, I've got the skeletons, I've got the 3 ghouls, so we put all those characters into this. And she had a ball making it.
Yeah, it was fun. It was fun, and people can find it. I don't know. Do you have it on YouTube?
Yes, and we put it on my Ed
Yeah.
Martinez YouTube channel. And if you want to put a link to my channel in the show notes or whatever, that would be great. And also, we posted it on the Ray Harryhausen Facebook page. You know, there's a Ray Harryhausen, I think it's called like the Fabulous World of Ray Harryhausen tribute page. And he has his own podcast too. There's a couple of gentlemen who are over in Scotland that run the Ray and Diana Harryhausen Foundation. And they have hosted many different events for like if we didn't have the My Sharona Cyrus, you know, they would have had this event in, I think it was going to be in Ireland, just right now, like in June and July, and running until like maybe till the end of the year or something like that. But unfortunately, they couldn't do it. You know, they had to cancel it. But these two men, they write books, they do podcasts. There's all this information, all this material that's in the archives. Like that, before Ray Harryhausen died, they did a whole bunch of interviews with him so that they could post them from time to time, even after his passing. So there's still stuff that has never been heard by the public because they recorded it just in private prior to his passing in his home. Like Carolyn Monroe would come over his house and they'd sit down and they'd do an interview with him and her, you know, and now they have this in the can that they can put little tidbits of that up on the podcast from time to time. So they have these special people whose job it is to restore the puppets. And, you know, some of the puppets that were rotting and falling apart are looking gorgeous, looking beautiful. I mean, I can't see them myself. Before I went blind, I did see several of the ones that this man had been repairing and beautifying, and they were gorgeous.
Yeah, foam latex doesn't last long. It's
So what's the name of that group?
On Facebook and the podcast is just called the Ray Harryhausen Podcast, I believe, on iTunes and things like that. But the Facebook group, I believe, is called the Fabulous World of Ray Harryhausen, something like that. But you know, I'm sure if you just put into Facebook into the search engine Ray Harryhausen. Multiple groups would come up, I would imagine, because there's one for Jim Danforth, who has also worked with Ray Harryhausen, and it's one called the When Dinosaur, or what is it called? When Jim Danforth Ruled the Earth.
It's so good that Ray, and this isn't always true in the business, but it's so great that Ray lived long enough to see his influence and just how loved he was. Because nothing breaks my heart more than you read about like Willis O'Brien dying pretty much in obscurity and probably feeling like someone who's failed and been forgotten and everything. And if they just lasted a little bit longer, the whole culture, this fan culture, that's no matter what you've done, there's people who are fascinated and want to hear about it. And it's good that at least he, who influenced so many people, did get to see. There's no way, you know, he knew just how important he was to everybody.
And what you say about Willis O'Brien is so true because, you know, he's from this area where I'm from. You know, I'm in what's called Hayward, California, which is very close to the town of Oakland, California. And Willis O'Brien was born and is an Oakland-born guy. And here in the Bay Area where Lucasfilm is, across the bay at the Presidio, in the buildings there where Lucasfilm are, they have a bronze statue of Willis O'Brien with the King Kong model, you know, like in his hand, you know. And so it's nice to see the tribute. There have been multiple tributes here in the Bay Area. Like in Oakland, there's a place, you know, the Kaiser Foundation, you know, has a big building, and they did an exhibit there in Oakland for Willis O'Brien and for stop motion and stuff.
Good.
So I've always loved that, you know.
Nice. Before we run out of time, I just wanted to give you a shot to talk about did you have a favorite project that you worked on, or maybe a favorite effect?
Well, not so much favorite, but, you know, we didn't talk about Arbiter yet, and I was going to tell you a little bit about Arbiter. Project Arbiter was a very interesting situation. There was a young man who, his name is Michael Chance. He came up with the idea, you know, it's a World War II concept, sort of like the kind of armored suits, you know, like Iron Man, like the first Iron Man costume, where he built that in a cave with a welding torch. This Arbiter suit was designed and built supposedly by the Germans, and the Americans send in a spy to capture it, you know, capture the plans and steal the only copy of the suit besides the one being worn by this American soldier who's dropped by a plane to infiltrate. And I got to do some interesting character makeup. Like they had a gentleman that they flew in from LA, an actor who had the right look to play like a German soldier, German general officer. And, your traditional like Colonel Klink looking kind of guy, with a monocle, and gave him one of those nasty dueling scars that goes down his face across his eye. That eye, I used my white contact lenses again, the ones that David Knott wore.
Yep, I was just going to ask you.
The same
that.
ones that we used for also for in the Dead Pit too, for the white eyes of Dr. Ramses, like how he pitches forward and then he pops back up and his eyes are white all of a sudden. We did a cut, put the eyes in. Okay, now roll again. And then we just cut and edited that together, So, he has one white eye, he has a big dueling scar, he has the monocle, and did a bullet hole forehead, blowed his head brains out. And I think in the behind the scenes documentary thing, you see me doing a test of that, outdoors with the guys. Yes. And so that was a nice, fun project. I got to do the German officer. I got to do his demise. I got to do a few other things as well for Project Arbiter, like a woman who had been experimented upon, like Nazi atrocities in a concentration camp where they would do medical and scientific experiments on people. And supposedly the concept in the film is that they were trying to figure out this invisibility material, this invisibility drug or whatever. And so they were just randomly injecting and doing atrocity experiments on helpless concentration camp inmates. Yeah. So one of the scenes in this really nasty, dirty, lab room scene provided several fake dead bodies for that scene and did all this makeup, all these prosthetics and silicone makeup on this girl all over her neck and her arm and stuff, and made her look all sweaty and stuff. And she's being tortured. She's tied down. And I think, does she not die? I forget if she dies in that scene or not. But yeah, yes. She has so much pain and torture that she just passes away, right? But so that was a nice little project. But it was a short, and what they intended to do was use this short film as proof of concept and try and get some big film company to want to underwrite it and back it and make a feature film out of it with a decent budget and everything. And they even went to Comic-Con, would put on military uniforms and bring their Arbiter suit guy and everything. And they'd go to Comic-Con, like, how you see pictures of people in Comic-Con out in the hallways dressed up in costumes and stuff. They did stuff like that to try and get a buzz going about it.
It's a good premise.
I actually, that's what I was thinking. I really liked the premise. And when it ended, I was a little disappointed because it obviously ends like...
Yeah, you want to see more.
Oh, that's a good thing. That's a good thing to end with.
Yeah, to leave them wanting more.
I help run a few film festivals, genre film festivals, and we get a lot of films like that are clearly part of a bigger picture or a bigger plan. And sometimes they don't do a very good job of telling a story in and of themselves. It's so clearly an advertisement for something, but I thought they did a good job with this one. And I like that premise a lot. So maybe when things get back to whatever normal is, some of these projects, maybe there's going to be a real hunger for material after we've exhausted everything there is on Netflix and Hulu. So
I hope so.
I'm hoping drive-ins make a return.
I've heard they have it. I've heard that there are some drive-ins real,
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah, in fact, the top budget films right now are drive-ins, right? Are ones that are released to drive-ins.
Yeah, this is a good time to release a film because you have a chance of being one of the top 10 films in the country. There may only be 10 that are released any given week, but by gosh, you're in the top 10 and you can take that to your grave.
One of the things I forgot to mention, I was going to tell you guys about that Western, the zombie Western, The Dead and the Damned. There's a couple of anecdotes about that. One was after that was all done and finished, the filmmaker, the director got an award. He in Spain, where they made all the spaghetti westerns, where they made The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, For $4 More, Hang 'em High, all those movies were made in a western, fake western town in Spain called Elmira, Spain. And they have a film festival there. And if it's only for Western type films. And this zombie Western got an award and was the film, and the filmmaker was invited to come all the way to Spain to meet and see the film and get an award and everything. So that was kind of unique.
Awesome.
That was kind of cool. And then on top of that, the other thing about the film is the man at the very end, the hero who comes in, he kind of has almost like a German accent.
The German, they call him the German.
He actually, how we met him and how the filmmakers met him, he's a double. He's a body double and a stunt double for Arnold Schwarzenegger. He was in Terminator. He was in Kindergarten Cop, like a lot of different Schwarzenegger films where they need a guy who's his same build and proportions and stuff. And that's Robert. That's the man who played that.
Yeah, Robert Amsler.
Yeah, and he was a very gentle giant, very nice guy, really pleasant to be around, very, very friendly. And, so that was fun to work with him. And then another kind of famous person involved in that production was the man who played the Indian, the Indian guy in that film.
Oh, yeah.
He was in the Twilight series. If you go, how the werewolves are all...
He was one of the werewolves.
He was one of the werewolf clan, and he's been in a lot of other things too. Mainly as an Indian actor, like as a model, as an Indian, as also or as a Native American, the proper way. But he's a very funny guy. He has his own YouTube channel, his own promotional stuff or commercial. For signing autographs and all that kind of stuff. And he told us stories about like being on shows like, where they talk, like have somebody who comes to repossess your car or your truck or whatever, he'd been on those kind of fake reality shows, where they do reenact.
Oh, okay.
He told us about being on those and stuff. So that film was very interesting to be involved in. And the work that I did on that, I don't know if you notice it, but because it was such a low budget and it was shot on video, but high-end video, HD, and the cinematographer was very good. He had really good equipment, good lighting, dolly track, all that kind of stuff. So can't fault the cinematography or the film editing or anything. But unfortunately, the low budget made it so that, I had to do everything again, like in other words, like the meteor. I made the meteor at the beginning.
Oh wow!
Which normally, the effects makeup guy doesn't do the props and the guns and the meteor and the glow and the the contact lenses, everything, But I did, and.
If you didn't do it, it wouldn't have gotten done.
Not only that, but even the filmmakers, the production, they were very inexperienced. They didn't have the kind of connections or ideas about how to do things like I did. Like they told me they wanted to make a zombie Western, and I just happened to know people who had a location up by Grass Valley in Auburn and the town of, what is it? It's by where the real gold rush was in California. They also shot Back to the Future up there and stuff like that. Jamestown. It's Jamestown, California. And so we met some people at another film festival who were involved with a Western reenactment group that made their own blanks, and they had their own guns. They had their own Western costumes and everything. And they would do blank shooting shootouts and stuff.
Oh, sure.
And so since I knew all of that, and here's these guys with this zombie Western, I said, put two and two together. So I contacted my friends, and they allowed us to come up and see their location. They had in their property on where they live, they had like an acre or so, and there's a Western fake town right there, facades, just the fronts of buildings, like with the hitching posts and the troughs for the horses and all that kind of stuff, a general store, a jail. Right. So all that Western town, all the cowboys, all the gun shooting, all that stuff would not have been in this film if I had not, put them together. So if you look on the credits for that film, it says Ed Martinez, location scout. Ed Martinez.
I saw that.
Ed Martinez, special effects. Ed Martinez, everything So,
I saw the location scout.
Right.
And some of the other ones too. Yeah.
It's like if they hadn't met me, they would have been shooting it in, somebody's backyard or something,
Yeah.
Well, I think I noticed too in that one, it looked to me like all the zombies all had, each of them had a little bit different look, it seemed like to me.
Though, I did reuse some appliances from Dead Pit. Like if you have a sharp eye, you could spot a zombie here or there that you're like, oh, yeah. Now that you mention it, and if I put a picture from Dead Pit and this guy's picture right next to each other, I see it's the same appliance, But that's because of low budget. It's like I still had those molds. I could still cast new pieces, but I didn't have the all those zombies in The Dead and the Damned. very few of them were the kind that we made a mold of their face beforehand. Most of that was just because I had appliances or I could do a makeup, out of the kit on them with putting silicone directly on their face and building a big wound. Like I did that on the throat of the hero. That was just a build-up appliance done with silicone directly on the day on his throat, on his neck. And the same thing with a couple of other wounds, like the one where the tomahawk to the face of a zombie that goes right across his face.
Mm-hmm.
That was another one that I just built up the material, the silicone material, as I did it, build it up as I went along. It takes longer to do that, but on a low budget, they pay for your time on set or they pay for your time in pre-production so that you can make life casts and build up, make sculptures and do molds and build appliances in the lab, before you bring it to the set. So,
yeah.
Well, that's a fun movie. I enjoyed watching it. I'm kind of a sucker for Western related stuff anyway, and there's not near as much Western horror.
I agree. I love Westerns too.
I enjoyed it. It's rough. It's definitely rough around the edges, or maybe even some in between. But it was fun to watch, and I got a kick out of the lead. David Lockhart was very athletic.
He's a great guy too. He's funny because he did not know how to ride a horse or anything, and we would not even have had a horse in the whole film if it hadn't have been for Cheryl, the lady whose home we used and who's had the Western location, and she was the connection that I had for all the cowboys, their own gun shooting and everything. So the whole front of the film, with there was 2 Western town locations. She knew somebody else who had one up there as well. And it was thanks to her, she even put up the filmmakers at her home, and my wife and I, we stayed in a hotel nearby because we were using our hotel room as the makeup room. Like all the zombies would come to our hotel and we would do them all up in our hotel room prior to them heading back over to the location where the cowboy set was. And she had a neighbor, or she had a horse. And so I think all he did was walk the horse. I don't think he gets up on it and rides it, but it looks like it's his horse and looks like, he's bedding down for the night. He's about to make a campfire. And so it works, like the zombie town, the Western town, the gun shooting, the fact that we had a real Native American, it all works.
One of these days, you and I are going to have to talk about this because I made a movie called Fistful of Brains. And I think we could trade war stories about zombie westerns.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, not to get too far off track, but I enjoyed Camille Montgomery too as Rhiannon, the female lead.
Real fine. She had, I don't think she had ever done anything before. I think she was one of those finds that the director, was looking for models or actresses online, and he found her through the internet,
Yeah. Well, I thought she did really good, and I especially liked the final take when her and the German are cornered on the cliff. And so it was a nice ending.
I like it because it kind of reminds me of Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. The way their film ends, with where you don't know what happens. You hear a bunch of gun shooting, and you know that they're going to go out and face the music, but you don't know what happens. That's what happens to Rihanna and Robert.
So Death Row.
Joe Estevez.
So Martin Sheen's brother, Joe Estevez, one of his bajillion credits. But that was actually, I kind of enjoyed that too. All of these films that we're talking about, I know this is nothing on you, Ed, but most of them are low budget. I'm trying to think of what was the one I was watching. Oh, The Story of Eva. That almost seemed like it would have been sort of a made for Cinemax or something, kind of a thing. But and Eric Roberts is hamming it up.
Yeah. Like, he was great. I loved working with him on.
Anyway, back to Death Row. And Todd Bridges having a pretty decent part, as a prison guard.
Yeah, he made 7 films for those filmmakers. Those are the Quiros brothers. And those guys are great. They were right here in my town. They were local filmmakers that they started back in the days of film, too. They were making films on 16 millimeter to start with. And they have quite a library. They made, maybe 4 or 5 other films. And I worked on a vampire one with them called I think it was just called The Damned. And we did a lot of, I think I sent you a picture from that. A vampire got thrown
Well, I think you did, and I don't think that's even listed on your credits.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that. It seems like we whenever we talk to folks in the business like yourself, an awful lot somehow doesn't make it to IMDb.
Yeah, and also I don't even know if that one's available, like if it's on the internet or if it's on a streaming service somewhere or whatever, because they had a deal with. What was the name of the company? They had a deal with a distribution company, a DVD distribution company. And toward the end of, the mom and pop video stores and stuff like that, that distribution company went out of business. And so they no longer had, a home for when their product was ready to go to market. And so they kind of just fizzled, they just stopped making films. And they befriended the guy who was one of the people involved with the Friday the 13th franchise, one of the writers who created the original story of Friday the 13th. And I know that they wanted to work with him if he could get, there's a big lawsuit involved with Friday the 13th right now. Once that's set, I think they might be doing something with him because that guy's going to get a ton of money.
It sounds like it.
One of the things you sent was showing like a proof of concept stabbing, leaving the knife in the back, right? Of Joe Estevez.
That's in the film. Like, in other words, the whole film is about a guy who I can't remember if he's if he's pretending to be a prison guard or if he really is a prison guard. But the movie is about prison. And in San Francisco, or near San Francisco, there's a place like along the road as you're going to San Francisco here in the Bay Area, there's a bridge that halfway between San Francisco and the in the middle is an island. It's called Treasure Island. And on Treasure Island was a military stockade for prisoners on this Treasure Island, and it was no longer being used, empty. But these guys, these filmmakers, found out about it, and they rented it, and they were able to use it for our prison movie. So we had a whole abandoned prison, a fairly modern looking one, not old fashioned like Alcatraz, but a fairly modern looking one, the kind that has glass walls and video cameras everywhere and all that kind of. So that's what we were able to film at. And we also filmed in a ship. Here in the Bay Area, there is a docked boat, an American military. I can't remember if it's an aircraft carrier or what, but it's the, I'm trying to remember the name of the ship. It's one of the ships that picked up astronauts when they splashed down in the ocean back in the day. But anyway, on board this ship, they even gave me a hat. I'm trying to remember the name of the ship, but the Hornet. It's the USS Hornet, and it's docked in Alameda County, and we were able to get permission to film on board the Hornet. And so the Hornet also kind of had places on board that looked like prison. Like there was the lunchroom for prison. We filmed that on board the Hornet, and some of the medical bay, places like where some of the murders and stuff like that happened in a like old-fashioned looking medical room, that was on board the Hornet. So combined with this place on Treasure Island for the defunct prison and using the Hornet, we had all those good locations. And the concept was these guys are all wearing orange jumpsuits. They're all in prison. And Joe Estevez is a prisoner. And somehow this guy, this prisoner, this murderer, he was, the flashback of me doing the prison rape, that's supposedly the motivation for him. He's abused and he was beaten and treated terribly in prison. And so he's seeking revenge. And so that's what Death Row is all about. And so Joe Estevez, I don't know if he's supposed to be the me character or if he's just one of the many people that either made it responsible for him going to prison or, he's just one of his main
Yeah, there's a line in there where he says something like, he says, "I didn't do that," and he said, "Yeah, but you didn't do anything to stop it," or something.
Yeah, so he's killing everybody one by one, who were anywhere involved with it. And that's, and Joe Estevez is like, besides Todd Bridges, who Todd Bridges plays a guard, and so Joe Estevez is playing a prisoner. So we have to have him get stabbed and killed at the end. And I did all the stabbing. I made the prop.
Oh, you actually did the stabbing.
Yeah, I did everything. I made the prop knives. I made, the rig, so it could look like the knife was sticking out of him. I think my hand, well, actually, yeah, because the guy's a Hispanic guy. And so I think they even used my hand so that it would look, like I knew how to do it, because I was manhandling the effect,
Well, it's got to be someone you can trust. You don't want to just let the key grip or the best boy do the stabbing because they don't.
Well,
know
not only that,
doing.
but they could break the prop, and then not only would the effect not work, but now we have to go back to the workshop and build a new knife or whatever,
and possibly hire a new actor. So it's just a total cock up from the word go. Yeah.
Okay, so that was you playing that guy.
I can't remember all the details now. I'd have to go back and look, but if I'm not mistaken, I think I did an insert with my hand of the stabbing or something. But anyway.
Very cool.
Anyway, I should have looked before because there's a picture of you and Joe Estevez, and you've got a tag on your shirt that says USS Hornet Visitor.
And, Joe Estevez was a prince. I mean, he's a beautiful person. He's a wonderful human being. And, he was an older gentleman and, but he was very interested in, staying physically fit. Like he was out jogging, every day and stuff. And I gave him a ride back to his hotel room. So we got to chit chat on the road and stuff. And he told me about, his relatives, his brother and his nephews and stuff, so it was awesome, to work with him. That's one of the greatest things. And Todd Bridges too. Todd Bridges is a very nice guy. Ironically, there was another location, another film, The Damned, was also one that Todd Bridges was in. And, all these low budget films were shooting all night long. And sometimes, there's 5 or 10 people who aren't needed. And so they're all hanging out on the offset. My wife is there and Todd Bridges and my wife are both falling asleep and they're both on a bed that was off to the side. So later on, my wife says, "Hey, I slept with Todd Bridges."
That's a claim. That's a claim.
Yeah.
So we always have fun, on these shoots.
That's great. That's good to hear.
Well, and you have a film, and you mentioned it once already. That's called Retarded.
Right.
And I was questioning whether we should talk about it. It may be the most politically incorrect title I've seen in quite a while, from 2008. But I did watch it, and if you could get past that, I believe
you might have a good time.
They're always referred to as it's an over the top comedy and this evil scientist. And if you watch the prequel to it called Monster, where the evil scientist creates a poop man from the sewers, I think, then. And this one, he comes back and some or another, he gets a job at this
school for the
like school for special education. Yeah. And he picks 4 or 5 of the residents there and turns them into zombies with this virus. And then they infect the town people pretty quick. So, there's some. The
story concept for the movie Flowers for Algernon, where they brain surgery on this guy, and he comes from being a simple man, to being practically a genius, but then it fades and he loses it,
Right. It's a heartbreaking movie.
Well, that's basically a comedy concept of zombies like that in this film.
Yeah. So there may be some offensive humor, but I found it to be pretty funny. These guys are obviously extremely low budget, but Lord, Ed, what did you use for there's an incredible amount of intestines and guts in that.
Well,
an incredible amount. It had some suitably bright red blood.
I had a question about that myself, so go ahead. What's your
secret?
One
of the 2 guys that made the film, the 2 gentlemen that are most responsible writer-directors are Dan West and Rick Popko, and the 2 of them play the sheriffs, the police sheriffs. And it's so funny because one of the 2 of them, Dan West, he is a amateur special makeup effects guy, and so before I got involved with the project, he was doing some makeup effects that you still see in the film. Like there's some heads that were made with a styrofoam wig head and stuff that they shot with a real shotgun and a few effects like that. Mm-hmm. And he was the one who they got real pig guts or cow guts or something.
That's what I was afraid of.
Real guts. And I wasn't there when they shot that stuff. Thank you. It's like, I never want to use real guts. You can, if if you want the real thing.
And they were
nothing
eating them.
Ever looks as good as the real thing, unless, you mold the real thing and stuff. But, I did make a lot of fake parts so that you could, I don't know who would be stupid enough to put uncooked, intestines and stuff in their mouth, but they did it, I guess,
Yeah.
I did the body being torn in half. I did the arm being ripped off. And in fact, if you want, somehow we can maybe show you, there's on the DVD of Retard Dead, there are some behind the scenes segments. And there's this one that I did, where I'm showing all the different things that I did, like blood and gore and arms being ripped off. And how did you like that one sequence where we had a bunch of exotic dancers? There's a group of women in San Francisco, and they go by the name of the Living Dead Girls. And that's kind of like Crystal. Isn't Crystal have a kind of thing? And
it is. That's
these girls in San Francisco, that's the name of their dance troupe. And they perform as zombies. They do their own zombie makeup, and they go to burlesque and nightclubs and stuff, and they perform dance routines, choreographed dance routines as zombie girls. So we got involved with them. The filmmakers met them and got involved with them, and they asked them to be involved in the film. And so for the climactic end death of the mad scientist guy that you were talking about, I molded his head. I made a fake head of him out of gelatin and stuff, and put guts and brains and everything behind it, and made a whole body. And the girls come out, and like he's being like seduced by them, and they surround him, and then they jump on him and piranha him and turn his body into just a skeletal corpse that's just got a little bit of meat and stuff left on it, and his head.
That's right.
Rip his flesh off of his face. So I had a.
No, I mean when they're done, there's just a like a skeleton with red shreds hanging from it.
So I did that thing, and we had a ball doing that on that day, making up all the girls. My crew and myself, my wife and my crew, we all went to those girls. They all lived together in a warehouse in San Francisco, and these are the kind of people. I don't know if you've heard of the Burning Man event and stuff like that. These are the kind of girls that they would love. They were part of the Burning Man. And so we went to their place in San Francisco. They had like a warehouse location where they lived. And we showed up 5 o'clock in the morning because there was like 5 or 6 girls. And we just attacked them with all the zombie appliances, the entire body from head to toe. We put zombie appliances on their inner thighs, on their backs, on their breasts, on their face, all over them. And then when they performed, you could see wounds and scars and everything all over their body. Normally when they perform, they try to stay a little prettier than that. And they make their own zombie makeup, just pale skin and dark circles and very few wounds, if any. But mine I made them look really rotted and horrible.
The terrifying thing is that there were probably a lot of folks watching that were really seriously turned on. It's like, that's when you start backing up.
I mean,
look for the
very
exit.
Attractive girls, and they know how to dance. They know how to move their bodies, and so.
I was going to say those were not just people off the street that they said to act like dancers.
The main girl, she's a choreographer, and she, with the troupe, they practice, they rehearse, they choreograph their routines and everything. And so we did rehearsals, we did practice, and we knew what shots we were going to do. We knew from what angles we were going to shoot. And I mean, how like there's that one part where they all piranha him, they all, the camera gets rushed and they're just covering the camera, and you can't see nothing, and then they pull back after the piranhaing. He's just a rotted, zombified meat corpse, But the killer shot was that when they ripped the face off of his skeletal frame,
Well, the ending of the film is funny too. So.
Oh yeah, good, great joke punchline.
Yeah, it was a fun project. It took a whole.
So yeah, I hope people give it a shot. I realize the title probably turns you off and makes you think, oh, this is just going to be one of those lame parody movies that has one joke and just stomps it to death. But it's actually worth watching.
And there's a closing song over the credits. That's funny. I mean,
yeah. Yeah, they even released a CD of music.
Okay. Well, this closing in the song over the credits, they just keep poking fun at themselves. They're just saying, "I can't." I bet you thought this was done. There's another verse left. And you're. I'm sure if you rented this, you covered your face as you walked out or you hid. And if you watch this, it was fun. So anyway, so I think we need to be winding up here.
Right.
The anything left that you want to talk about? Any particular effects or gags that you did, or even about your association with Clive Barker and the Cenobian magazine?
So what happened, that's actually how I met my wife. Years ago, I was involved with a Hellraiser magazine called Cenobium. And we used to go to conventions and have a dealer's table and sell our issues and everything. And we would go to all the events, Fangoria conventions or San Diego Comic-Con, or if Clive Barker was going to be doing a book signing, for one of his new books or whatever, we would show up. And so over the years, we befriended Clive Barker and Doug Bradley, the actor who played Pinhead, and the writer Pete Atkins, who wrote the second and third films and stuff. And so we became very close associated with all these people. And through the fandom as well, a couple of gentlemen became the Clive Barker podcasters, Jose and Ryan. And through them, I have been guest appearing on their podcast from time to time, discussing various films, just like you guys review, or do a commentary track of a particular film. Right now, we're covering the Clive Barker book, The A to Z of Horror. And the next one we're going to do is, I believe it's F is for Flesh, and we're going to discuss the films of H.R. Giger. So we're going to do Alien and some other Giger and films, But so I'm really getting into the podcasting thing. I've always had the gift of gab. I've always been a huge fan of films. And even though I'm blind now, with my wife's help, we can even do commentaries on films, because I'm very familiar with the film, as long as it's one I've seen before and we own.
Right.
We can put it on and let it roll while we're discussing it, with the people on the podcast.
That's an interesting perspective you have, that when you're viewing a film now, when you're experiencing a film now, you're not maybe seeing it there, but you're seeing your memories of it and using the music and the sound effects and all the other aspects. That's very interesting. I mean, that's kind of a unique perspective that most of us would not even think about trying to do. I mean, we could do it, just you turn on the volume and don't look at it. But that I find that very interesting. I think that'd be worth listening to. Your perspective on these films that you've seen so often.
What else is interesting? What blind commentator on movies that's out there. But what's interesting too is the fact that, nowadays, almost all movies, like Marvel movies, Sony movies, they all have that audio commentary for the blind segment or, button you can push. And a lot of Netflix has it, and a lot of Hulu has it and stuff like that. So, I belong to like a Facebook group for people that do audio commentaries for the blind, and for blind people who are looking for audio commentaries for the blind. And so it's a very interesting group, where we discuss it and we talk about, the various voice actors and, their inflections. And, some of them are real quiet and they stay, very subdued so they don't interfere with the tone of the film and stuff. And, so they all have their own styles. It's very interesting.
Yeah.
I want to get into that.
Well, it is, because I didn't even know that existed, so I'm going to have to check that out. But that's very cool.
Look on your remote, and where it's got the buttons, to find a foreign language, like on a DVD or on Hulu, or if you're on Netflix, there's a button on your remote that says, foreign languages and stuff like that. That's where you'll find it's called AD, audio description for the blind, or English description. Audio English description. So look in the foreign language section there, and you'll click it. Okay. And then it'll come on. Check it out sometime. It's interesting.
Well, I think we need to wind up, and I want to thank you, Ed, and thanks to Nina too, for all her help.
Thank you, and thank you very much for having us. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks so much for coming on.
My pleasure. I love talking about movies. Maybe blind, but I still love movies.
That's awesome. Yeah.
So that's it for this episode. But every 2 weeks now, we've switched to a 2-week schedule. We'll be focusing on a specific film released between 1980 and 1989. And next up, we have a couple options. We're waiting for a response from another special guest. So I'm not sure if that will pan out or not. That will determine what our next film will be. So you're going to have to live with the mystery. Plenty of ways to stay in touch with us. Please send your feedback to feedback@gruesomemagazine.com or leave comments on Gruesome Magazine's H&R and DOH podcast Facebook group, the website at gruesomemagazine.com, or, give a review on iTunes. Shoot us a comment. Catch us here again in 2 weeks for another great horror movie of the 1980s, as only decades of horror can do it. And thanks again, Ed.
My pleasure. Anybody out there who's blind or handicapped and listening to this and wants to reach out and get in contact with me, I'm on Facebook under my name, Ed Martinez. And if you guys want to put my information in the show notes, feel free.
Will do.
Awesome.
Okay.
All right. Say goodnight, everybody.
Good night, folks.
Keep America strong. Watch horror films.
That's right.
He speaks the truth.